Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Tiny Tiger Collective. I'm Helena, and today I'll be sharing with you a flip through and my honest impressions of working in my first Hobonichi Weeks. Last week, I shared with you a flip through and my detailed thoughts of what it's been like working in the other Hobonichi Weeks that I bought, which I use as a work planner. This is the Unsoro Bijitsukai cover, and the chaotic yet symphonic blend of different shapes and colors was for me a very apt metaphor for what it can often feel like in an academic job where I cobble together different tasks, activities, and responsibilities to try to build something of a coherent career. Please go and watch that video in your own time if you would like to complement today's video with an account of what it's been like doing all of my work and career tracking in this other Hobonichi Weeks. If you haven't seen my previous video, I will offer a very brief recap of my relationship and history with Hobonichi and how I landed here. So I discovered Hobonichi back in 2023. As a fountain pen lover and collector, lots and lots of people were telling me that I needed to get into Hobonichi planners in order to experience firsthand the beautiful thin Tomoe River paper that showcases fountain pen inks particularly well. So I dipped my toes in the water by purchasing this Hobonichi A6 original Techo, which I kept as a baby book to document my son's first year of life. I loved daily journaling in here, and I really loved the way that it showcased my fountain pens and my inks. So in 2024, I decided that I would experiment with a one book system where I would keep all the different aspects of my life in this one catch-all book. So with this larger A5 size, I felt like I would be able to track all of my work, personal and family tasks in the one place, while having enough space to long form journal about everything from personal, emotional, weighty matters that I needed to work through on paper, through to documenting the really happy memories that I was making with my family. Although I thought it would be convenient and easeful to have everything in the one book, unfortunately and unexpectedly, I found that it felt mentally chaotic for me to keep everything in the one place. My aspiration was that I could keep Hobonichi A5 cousins for the next 10 years of my life, and eventually I would build up a formidable archive of my whole life with a book for every year over the next decade. But as I started using these pages to vent about work stress or interpersonal conflict, I felt less interested and less motivated by the idea of keeping this book. And I thought that maybe at the end of the year, I would rather recycle this book so I could purge out the emotional muck that I had spewed onto these pages that helped me work through challenging and tricky situations in my life. But I wanted to release them at the end of the year rather than hold on to them for posterity. So in 2025, I decided to swing the pendulum the other way. And instead of trying to keep everything in the one book, I would buy multiple books. So My 2024 A5 Hobonichi cousin is actually a spring start. So I still had the first 3 months of the year to use it to transition out of long form journaling. But alongside that, I felt like I really missed the tenderness of working in an A6 baby book. So I purchased another A6 Techo to use as my now toddler book for daily journaling of all the happy memories that I get up to with my son. In addition to this book, I am also keeping these two Hobonichi Weeks. So today I want to give you a flip through of the book that I keep as my health and wellness planner and talk to you a little bit about how that's been going for me. So first off, this Hobonichi Weeks for 2025 is the Yumi Kitagishi beautiful wallpaper design. I believe it was based on a painting that the artist had created for a dollhouse. So this was the wallpaper that she had designed, and she's repurposing it as a planner cover. If you can't already tell, I am a big fan of Yumi Kitagishi. I'm a very simple woman. If I see cats, I buy it. So this particular design was one that I immediately fell in love with, and it felt like it was soothing my inner child. So I thought it would be the perfect book for me to use as a health and wellness tracker because it can be a place where I cultivate healing and joy. So here I have the artist information card at the front so that the little white cat with her pencil and notebook can greet me every day. I have some very simple stickers that I've used to accent some of these pages, and this one came as a freebie when I made a small order with Joanne of Koala Tea Care. I refer to this page from time to time to look at the current year, previous and the next year calendars, and using a Tombow marker in a light lilac that I thought matched the cover, I mark down the public holidays of my state. I have been using the annual spread, the yearly spread, to track my cycle. On the monthly pages, I make a note of life events, anniversaries, birthdays, but also public holidays. In the very first monthly spread of the year, or at least of this book, which was December last year, I experimented with using a Tombow marker to very lightly highlight the bottom row of each of the daily square. And in there, using my Uniball 1, I have been marking down the number of steps I took that day. I didn't expect this ink to be so dark and so contrasting with all the other muted colors that I use. And so having written down what my steps were for every day of that month, I really hate the way it looks. Like every time I look at this page, it looks a little bit like my Uniball 1 vomited on this page. And it's very garish and very glaring to me as well. So I stopped tracking my steps in that way, and I'm giving it a little bit of a pause. I don't know if this happens to any of you where you have an idea of how something looks, and when it looks really bad, it's like a bit of a stain that kind of demotivates you from tracking a particular thing or using it in a particular way that is perhaps useful and functional on its own, but because it looks so unpleasant, it's a bit of a deterrent from keeping it up. I also don't find that I'm particularly interested in knowing how many steps I take. I generally walk a lot, and now that I have a 2.5-year-old who is infinitely energetic. I am chasing after him all the time, that it is quite unusual for me to do anything less than around 10,000 steps a day. And that's generally my standard. And I don't have a lot of fluctuation. So I don't have a day where, for example, I'm, tempted to stay at home laying on the couch reading all day. And then at the end of the day, I find out, oh, maybe my lower back feels a little bit sore. And then I can look back on my planner and go, oh, no wonder I only did 3,000 steps today. That's why. I mean, that's just not my life. I dream of the day that my son is independent enough that I could lay around and read a book. I mean, that was, that was true luxury. Now that I'm a mum, I appreciate just how fortunate I used to be. But my day will come. But for now, I don't find that necessarily keeping track of my steps is that significant or that meaningful to my health. So after we skip by the monthlies, what I loved about the Hobonichi Weeks in 2025 was that the spreads started all the way back in November 25th. So that gave me over a month to try out the spreads and make micro adjustments and tweaks to my routine, my processes, if I needed to enhance the functionality and the ease of all of my week by week spreads. So, what I chose to do in my health and wellness planner is using the little markers on this side of the page. I split the left hand weekly spread into 3 equally sized columns. Compare this with my work planner, where I draw the first vertical line, and then using this grid design on the back of this page as a subtle guide, I draw roughly 1 square width long so that I make a very narrow strip that allows me to more neatly tick off all of my work tasks while tracking what exactly I need to do on the right hand wider column. And then I have that small square, which is the same size as this, on the left-hand column to track work events, functions, and meetings. So splitting my health and wellness spread into these 3 columns with a bonus 4th allows me to track a number of different things that have worked quite well for me. So on the left-hand side, just like in my work planner, I use that to track events, appointments. So it could be dentist appointments or it could be doctor's appointments. So things generally related to personal and to health matters. In the middle column, I write what my care priority is for the day. So this is a place where I really get to take stock of how I'm feeling in my body. And for example, I could look at this week, in particular last year in November, my work was starting to wind down and we were moving into the festive season with the university shutdown. So I could see myself transitioning into the rest period while maintaining my productivity to tie up the loose ends of my work. So with that in mind, I know that there are spaces where I could work very hard in the morning, but then force myself to take the afternoon off in order to decompress and avoid burnout. When I was a younger woman earlier in my career, I pushed myself really, really hard at work to the detriment of my health and well-being. So I would try to achieve as much as possible. And then the moment I stopped working, whether it was for a holiday, whether it was for public holiday seasons, I would immediately get sick because it was like my body had broken down after burning the candle at both ends. And it was forcing me to take a break to rest and restore. So to avoid burnout at this season of my career, I use this planner to help me designate how I am going to pour back into myself each and every day. I can also look at my events as well as tune in to how I'm feeling in order to redirect different care tasks. So care can look very different. It might be that I am planning a trip overseas, and so care for that day will look like getting my flu vaccination. On other days, it could be that I've noticed I'm feeling lonely and isolated. So I would be deliberate and intentional in deciding that, let's say, for the following week, I would spend some time reaching out to my friends who I haven't seen in a while and organizing a lunch or a dinner with them in order to make sure that the social animal in me is being nurtured. I also experimented with using the third column as a way for me to document my mood. When I began this planner, I did a little mood chart on the right hand side where I would have sort of very sad, meh, neutral, happy, very happy along this scale, Monday to Sunday, and I would mark where I would fall. But this I found was actually too simplistic because sometimes, let's say, I might have had a really difficult morning, but then I still myself over lunch. Maybe I take myself out on a lunch date. I spend some time journaling, or I might even spend a bit of my lunch break meditating, and I feel my mood improve. And I might even end up having a really enjoyable afternoon or really happy evening. And so simply marking that day, let's say splitting the middle and saying that it was a meh day, that doesn't really capture the actual journey that I took over the course of the day. So I have this third column that allows me to add a little bit extra nuance and detail into exactly how I felt and what I think contributed to some of those feelings. So there I said I got great rest overnight. So it would just be little moments there where I would say, well, yes, maybe this says I'm happy, but why was I happy? What did I do that made me happy? And am I happy as in I'm exuberant, excited, and optimistic? Or am I happy in that I feel content, affectionate, and loving? They have very qualitative differences, but they might both still be categorized as very happy. Part of my motivation for keeping this planner came from the inspirational example of Alison from Little Coco Studio. So she's been tracking her health and wellness in a Hobonichi Weeks all through last year. And it was through seeing her example that showed me all the different ways in which a health and wellness planner could help me to be more mindful about the ways in which I was taking care of myself. But part of that is needing to tailor the journal to my unique health and wellness needs. One of the things that I've been grappling with is sleep maintenance insomnia. So, unlike regular insomnia, where you would have trouble falling asleep at the start of the night, tossing and turning in bed, I have sleep maintenance insomnia, which means that I generally have no problems falling asleep at the start of the night, but I have on and off struggled with waking up in the middle of the night and being unable to fall back asleep. So for me, tracking sleep is very important, not because I care about how many hours of sleep that I've gotten, because part of the thing that people with chronic insomnia experience is sleep anxiety related to a little bit of misinformation or perhaps overly generalized reductionistic information around how much people need to sleep. So many of us have heard the mythic guidelines that everybody should get 8 hours of sleep every night. But this belies the complexities and the biological differences of every human being, where some of us actually need less sleep than others, some of us might need more than 8. Some of us might have underlying health conditions like sleep apnea that reduce the quality of sleep. So, therefore, people who don't get as much deep sleep for a whole host of reasons might need more hours to feel rested than someone who has fewer hours but more efficient sleep. So, for a range of reasons, a lot of sleep information and sleep hygiene information can lead people like myself with chronic sleep maintenance insomnia down the wrong path. So, I've struggled with sleep maintenance insomnia on and off throughout my life, as probably as far back as I could remember to when I was around 25 years old. But where my sleep maintenance insomnia got really bad was when I was a new mum and I was getting up 2 hours through the night to breastfeed my son. And coupled with all of my anxieties as a mum around, am I feeding my child enough? Are they sick? Are they unwell? Are they uncomfortable? All of that resulted in me learning this intense anxiety when I wake up in the middle of the night. So, in my worst nights over the last 2 years, I will sometimes go to bed at 10 o'clock, immediately fall asleep when my head hits the pillow, wake up at 2 a.m. after 4 hours of sleep, and then I toss and turn for the rest of the early morning until the sun comes up and I'm unable to fall back asleep. One night, that anxiety coupled with my insomnia, so that I had brief moments where I would fall asleep for 15 minutes only to then jerk awake from a nightmare. And I decided that with that problem intensifying, I couldn't just roll with the punches of, oh, yeah, I had insomnia again. Oh, well, nothing I could do about it. Go to bed earlier tonight. That's all. To realizing that maybe I could be more proactive about educating myself and researching sleep maintenance insomnia and specifically evidence-based solutions to it, which in my case was CBTI or cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. So I watched a range of seminars with sleep scientists. I learnt about some of the unhelpful and in some cases misinformation that can come through with general pop science sleep hygiene guidelines. And I learnt that some of the most effective tools to dealing with sleep maintenance insomnia is sleep restriction and stimulus control. So I started practicing those two techniques more rigorously at the end of last year, and I've personally found them incredibly helpful. So while at the end of last year, here through December and January, my sleep was actually quite good. I do use my planner to track when I've had a little bit of sleep maintenance insomnia. And you'll see that one was a bit of a one-off. And then I had a whole week, another week without any sleep maintenance insomnia. However, in January, my sleep maintenance insomnia did come back with a little bit of a vengeance. So what I did was to go back to my sleep restriction and my stimulus control practices, and I tracked what I was doing and how I was going to support myself to return to that practice. And by instigating some of those good habits again, I was once again able to get my sleep maintenance insomnia a little bit more under control. In the first few spreads of this planner, I experimented with tracking what I ate. This was not a dietary restriction practice, but I wanted to understand if there were any patterns in between what I ate and also some of my symptoms or some of my day-to-day discomforts. What I found was it was actually very hard to remember what I ate. So if ever I forgot to update this book like I did this week, I completely forgot what I ate and I just had no records and I could not for the life of me rack my brains. There are also places here where I'd say, oh, I ate this as a snack, only to remember, no, I didn't eat that on Friday. I ate that on Saturday, and I'd be moving things down. Here, I completely forgot when I remembered to update this. I forgot what I ate for dinner, but I remembered what I ate for breakfast and lunch. It was all a bit of a mess. And honestly, there were some days where I couldn't remember what I ate for breakfast, but I made a guess that it was peanut butter on toast, and I would write that down there. After keeping track of what I was eating for a few weeks, I really didn't feel the need to do that. I wasn't seeing any patterns, and it was just frustrating me that I would constantly be forgetting. So, what I started keeping track of in mid January was actually keeping track of my caffeine intake, because that is something that I think would much more likely relate to my sleep and my energy levels, my overall well being and focus, rather than what I was eating. So I gratefully let go of tracking what I was eating and I started tracking my caffeine intake. Here I would write, my coffee, black tea, green tea, hojicha, bubble tea, because I love I love drinking fun drinks throughout the day, but not all of them are made equal. So, yes, like one espresso made with freshly ground coffee beans, that's going to give me my strongest caffeine boost. But I can't say that drinking a cup of green tea or drinking a cup of hojicha would actually have the same caffeine kick. So that's why I was noting it down. But admittedly, this was quite hard to quantify when looking back at the end of a week. So there were a lot of things about this planner that were working well for me, but some things that needed to be improved. So, one of the things that I started to do earlier in February was going back to Alison from Little Coco Studios' example. I looked at the ways in which she was more meaningfully tracking her habits and some of her health symptoms. So here was actually at the end of the week when I decided to just play around with what that layout would look like. One of the things that I found was that my habit tracker wasn't always working for me, because there are some habits that honestly just become habit. So I read every day, I brush my teeth every day, I floss my teeth every day. I didn't really feel a need to list down some of these things, because for me it was almost always about coming back at the end of the week and just drawing in every single box. So rather than me serving the planner by filling it out and making it look more complete with like fun graphs and charts, was really more about me tracking the sort of things that I wanted to turn into a habit. So it's been very hot and humid where I live, and it's not always been comfortable to find opportunities to walk during the day. But as it started to cool down, particularly in the evenings, I wanted to reintroduce walking as a daily habit. So here I began tracking my walking. I signed on for Apple Fitness Plus when I purchased a new phone. And so, playing around with the yoga routines and the yoga videos, I wanted to establish that as a routine. I was tracking when I journaled, when I engaged in some sort of mindfulness meditation or mindfulness exercise, when I had meaningful social interactions. And I'm being gentle with that because, again, really busy as a mum with a toddler. I don't always get to go out for, let's say, a 2 hour lunch with my friends, but it might look like, for example, having a phone call with a friend, or having a video call with my family, something like that, I would list as social. I track when I take my vitamins, when I do my skincare routine, and when I get to have some cuddles with both my son and my partner. I did write out the tracker, but I couldn't remember what I had done at the end of the week. So I simply wanted to get a feel for what it would look like. So in the following week, you'll see that in addition to checking off my habits, I started tracking a little bit more of my mood, and I started to note when I've experienced anxiety. And another thing that I have been navigating in my health is that 2 years ago, I was diagnosed with PTSD from a really brutal 3 years working in a very toxic organization. At the height of my PTSD, the three symptoms that I grappled with the most were hypervigilance, meaning that I would engage in very anxious practices that I thought was helping me to protect myself against violence and abuse, but often were very kind of compulsive and consuming practices. So, for example, a lot of the abuse that would happen at this previous workplace was through incredibly demeaning and humiliating emails. And what I used to do was to keep really detailed notes of everything that I was doing and every interaction I had with anyone at work, keeping logs of dates, times, what was said, by whom, and when, including tacit communication of body language, gestures, eye rolls. And then I would sit in front of my inbox and refresh every 5 minutes to wait for an abusive email to come in. Even after leaving that organization, when my PTSD flared up, I would do the same and sit in front of my computer with a foreboding sense of dread that a really abusive email would come in, even when I had left that organization. The second symptom that I faced was disassociation. So when the anxiety got so bad and I had been sitting with it and stewing in it for days and days, there would come a point where it would be as if my physical body couldn't handle that level of heart rate, intensity, arousal anymore, and it would just shut down. And I would find myself disassociating. I would zone out in conversations. I would feel like I was looking through a murky glass. Or there was one example where my husband and my son were together and we were all talking, laughing, joking on the bed. And all of a sudden, it was like I was plunged underwater. And I could hear them, but it was in that kind of warbled way when you hear people on shore when you're swimming under the water and it sounds like wah, wah, wah. And it was like I couldn't swim up to the surface. So disassociation would be a rare but a fairly intense and scary symptom that I used to experience. And the third symptom was flashbacks. So there would be times where, like, I could be making myself coffee or I could be reading a book, and all of a sudden, maybe there'd be a small trigger or even just a memory would pop into my head, and I would have a very intense and vivid flashback to something really traumatic that I experienced. And usually, what that would look like is sort of like I would seize up and I would go through the flashback, and uncontrollably, I would often scream something out like no or stop or something that was just in a way that it was almost like I was there. At least I would feel like I was there, but I was trying to make the violence or make the abuse stop. So I'm happy to say that after 2 years of care, of therapeutic support, of loving family, including extended family and friends, and really an exquisitely kind workplace that I'm currently working in and I have been working in for the last 3 years, my PTSD has significantly improved. It's not gone forever. And a part of me imagines that I would be carrying it for potentially the rest of my life, but hopefully growing around it and refining the sorts of resources and techniques I have at my disposal to navigate it with compassion and care. But right now, one of the only symptoms that I would experience on a slightly regular basis would be flashbacks. So I've decided to track flashbacks as a way of noting when it happens. What I've been experimenting with is rather than always marking them off with a dot, I've been trying to mark them off with crosses. So for me here, I've been tracking the fact that on Tuesday night, I had a little bit of sleep maintenance insomnia, but for me, it was a minor one. A full-blown sleep maintenance insomnia for me looks like, say, waking up at 2 a.m. and feeling really anxious, my heart is racing, and I can't fall back asleep for at least an hour. So that would be for me maybe a proper cross. But in this particular case, I woke up, I wasn't really feeling anxious. A big part of, I think, why I was uncomfortable and didn't fall back asleep immediately was because I was really warm. So I got out of bed, I went to the couch, I did a meditation, and then pretty much after 15, 20 minutes, I was feeling super, super sleepy, and I went back into bed and immediately fell back asleep. So that's why this day only gets a half cross. I also track my migraines, and on this day, my migraine was very, very faint. So I just had a whisper of a migraine on Wednesday morning. I took some ibuprofen and it pretty much disappeared within 20, 30 minutes. So that's why this one also only gets a half cross. It would warrant a full cross for me when the pain is quite intense and it is impacting my day-to-day function, my work, my rest. Sometimes when it's really bad, I might take ibuprofen and it doesn't make the headache go away. It might dull it a little bit, but I might get other symptoms of potentially feeling disoriented or feeling dizzy, and sometimes, feeling quite nauseous as well and needing to lie down. So far, I'm really loving this system, and I'm finding that this works really well for me in order to provide a more comprehensive snapshot. And here I'm tracking the mood by just writing and drawing the smiley face or sad face, depending on how I'm feeling, rather than the chart that I used to use, which actually, does actually take a little while to sketch out. So I'm just drawing the icon here, but still using this third column on the left-hand side to elaborate on how I'm feeling and if there were differences throughout the day, like a good morning but a bad evening, or a bad morning and a good evening. I feel so excited about having this health planner, and it's something that has become a unlikely partner in my recovery and in my general well-being. I feel like having this space to formally codify how I'm feeling, where things might not be going as smoothly as they could, and what I'm doing about it allows me to be more intentional as well as be more proactive about taking good care of myself. So before this year, when I didn't have this planner, I might experience sleep maintenance insomnia, but to me, it was almost like a conversation I was having in my head, like, oh yeah, it's been really bad lately. Oh, but hopefully it'll get better. But being forced to write down or check off when I've experienced insomnia makes me more accountable to doing something about it. So after I experienced sleep maintenance insomnia flaring up in January, I immediately noted down how I was going to reinstate sleep restriction therapy and stimulus control in order to help me reestablish better habits around my sleep. I haven't been seeing a doctor or a psychologist about any of my illnesses recently, but I know that if I ever needed to this year or later, it would be invaluable to have these records in order to be able to recount, well, when did my insomnia begin? How have the migraines become more frequent? Is it once a month? Is it 3 times a week? What have I been doing about it? If I've been taking any medication, I will also make an effort to write that down, when I started, what my dosage is, how frequently I've been taking that medication, also that I could have these records. I find when I don't take records, it's easy for me to distort the reality. So because I feel anxious about my insomnia, it may feel as though I have suffered with insomnia 5 days a week for the last 5 weeks. But I look back on my actual records and I say, oh, no, it only started 2 weeks ago. And in fact, then I had a week where it was absolutely fine and it's only come back this week. So it's nowhere near as intense as it felt when maybe my perception is being distorted by anxiety or by suffering. I've also changed my caffeine to now list the number of caffeinated drinks that I'm having. And again, this isn't perfect because 2 would mean 1 cup of strong coffee in the morning, but maybe a cup of green tea in the afternoon. And they're not really comparable, but nevertheless, I'm just trying to be transparent and honest with myself so that I could ideally reduce the caffeine intake, because I find that it's not so much drinking caffeine that affects me. And I tend to drink all my caffeine before 12 or 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So they don't affect my sleep, but my caffeine intake tends to affect my energy levels the next day. So when I had 3 cups of coffee, I woke up the next day after sleeping 7 hours solidly overnight. I still felt really tired when I woke up in the morning, and that's often for me a sign of caffeine withdrawal. I also get more migraines when I'm experiencing caffeine withdrawal. So hopefully, if I'm tracking my caffeine and I'm being honest and transparent with myself about how much I'm hitting the coffee, the tea, I will try to be a bit more conservative in my intake so that I can maintain more healthy energy levels and minimize the migraines that emerge. So I really have loved this book, and it's very early to commit myself to anything, but I do imagine myself keeping another Hobonichi Weeks next year to use as a health and wellness tracker. There's something about having this book that makes it feel like I have a friend or a carer who I am able to be in relationship with in order to stay alert and aware of my health and healing. So this has been an absolute joy. And I have to thank Alison for not only devising this tool, but so generously sharing the step-by-step process of how she planned, structured, and maintains her health and wellness planner, walking us through every nitty-gritty decision into what she decides to track and how she decides to track it. So I've gone back and rewatched some of her hour-long videos about her health and wellness planner multiple times in order to help me build a system that is working for me. And I have no doubt that I will continue to develop this system. And just to show you that none of us are perfect over here, I had some high hopes for what I was going to do with the notes section that's at the back of all of the Hobonichi Weeks. And here you'll see I had plans to do a table of contents. I was going to do an annual tracker. I've seen people write all the months of the year and they write things like car maintenance or maybe like big things like washing out their filters, replacing their water filters, washing out their bed sheets, and they would mark how they were doing that all throughout the months. So you can look, oh no, how did I forget to wash my bed sheets all through March? Oh my God, I have to do it at the start of April right away. So it's like a way of tracking that, or my cleaning tracker. I was going to track my purchases. And that did not work out. I even had a place where I was going to track some of my personal hobbies, my favorite books. I can always go back and do that at the end of the year. I was going to do a monthly review. So January, February, at the end, I would write, how did I feel? What were the highlights? What were the lowlights? What do I need to change? And none of that happened. Maybe one of these days when my baby is a little bit more independent and I've got more time to work in my books, maybe when I'm not juggling 4 different Hobonichi planners for long form journaling, toddler journaling, health and wellness, and my work. One of these days, I might be able to have some real fun and do some beautiful aesthetic spreads in my notes that I can show off on my YouTube channel. But for now, I can only keep it real with you and show you that we're just doing the bare minimum. And we're doing what serves us in this season of our lives, or my life. And in this season of my life, I am so grateful to my health and wellness tracker for being a friend to me and for helping me keep on track with my well-being. So thank you so much for watching this video. If you keep a health and wellness tracker in any way, maybe along with all of your other work, personal, family trackers, maybe it's got a special little book of its own with a cover you adore like mine, I would love to hear your experiences and your experimentations of what worked and what didn't work for you, and maybe how you solved some of the problems that you encountered. Thank you, as always, for being here and being so generous, kind, compassionate with your comments and with all the wisdom that you share. I appreciate you all so much, and I look forward to seeing you all in my next video. Thank you and take good care. Bye bye.